In May 1945,
Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt,
the most senior German commander on the Western Front,
sat across a table from Allied intelligence officers.
The Americans asked him a simple question.
Why did Germany lose?
The career soldier gave three clean mechanical answers.
Allied air superiority made daylight movement impossible.
A lack of motor fuel paralyzed his tanks.
And the systematic destruction of the railway network strangled his supply lines. Air, fuel, and rail.
He
missed a fourth factor, mostly because his entire military education lacked a word for it. He didn't mention the other trucks, the ones driven by college-educated women, carrying popular records, coffee urns, and commercial donut fryers. The German High Command could calculate firepower, maneuver, and supply, but they were entirely blind to a massive fleet of American Red Cross Clubmobiles. Their doctrine had no concept for a logistical system dedicated exclusively to the strategic value of morale. The United States military took 2.5-ton GMC transport vehicles, the exact same heavy trucks used to haul artillery shells and aviation fuel, and retrofitted them into mobile recreation centers. They devoted precious shipping tonnage and gasoline to move baked goods and music to the front lines. To operate this machinery, the military bypassed standard soldiers and instead brought in highly educated, single civilian women. The Red Cross vetted these volunteers through a selection process so rigorous, they accepted only 1 in 6 applicants, a higher rejection rate than many combat units. These women had to maintain their own heavy vehicles and endure punishing physical labor. They stood in the freezing mud for hours at a time, pouring coffee and cracking jokes with exhausted infantrymen while they were actively dodging incoming artillery fire.
In the middle of the deadliest conflict in human history,
a nation fighting for its survival chose to divert vast industrial and human capital into getting a fried pastry into the hands of a rifleman in a foxhole.
The underlying logic
behind this operation actually traces back to October 1917.
Inside a flooded tent
in France, a Salvation Army volunteer named Helen Purviance used a spent artillery shell casing
frying 7 donuts at a time
over an open flame for cold, exhausted American troops.
A donut provides
almost zero military value in terms of nutrition or combat effectiveness.
The
transaction was an act of national intimacy. A terrified soldier, thousands of miles from home, was handed something warm by an American woman whose sole purpose was to make him feel like a human being rather than a serial number. This chart shows the exponential scaling of that concept during the Second World War. The American Red Cross, backed by a nation of assembly lines, took the improvised empathy of 1917 and industrialized it, eventually producing 1.6 billion donuts across the European and Pacific theaters. At the peak of that production curve in 1944, the system turned out 400 donuts per minute. The United States mass-produced human empathy with the exact same logistical efficiency it applied to building tanks. The German military's approach to troop care was vastly different. It relied heavily on state-controlled propaganda and operated on the assumption that soldiers would live off the land in conquered territories. By 1944, as they were pushed into retreat, their logistics devolved to horse-drawn wagons and scavenged supplies. This logistical collapse peaked in December 1944 during the Battle of the Bulge. The final massive German offensive through the Ardennes relied almost entirely on capturing American supply depots, forcing Allied prisoners to refuel Panzer tanks at gunpoint because the Reich could no longer fuel its own army. Yet, directly across the lines in that exact same frozen theater, the American Clubmobiles refused to leave. Women like Jill Pitts-Knappenberger and her crew stayed in the combat zone, running their fryers while the deadliest German offensive of the war raged around them.
of the war raged around them.
The continuous presence of these unarmed civilian trucks during a chaotic retreat gave the American infantrymen an anchor. It served as a persistent signal that the nation was still watching, even as the front lines buckled under the weight of the German attack. General George S. Patton was not a man given to sentimentality, but he issued a formal endorsement of the Red Cross Clubmobiles. To Patton, the work was a tactical necessity. He believed that maintaining the spirit of the frontline troops was a prerequisite for combat effectiveness, putting the weight of the Third Army behind the Red Cross operation. The mechanism behind this fighting spirit happened right at the service window. It was 30 seconds of juvenile jokes, small talk out baseball, and eye contact with a young woman from back home who remembered a soldier's name. Those brief exchanges provided a necessary cognitive break. For half a minute, the young man at the window wasn't a soldier heading toward a line where a quarter of his platoon might die within a month. He was just a guy making a bad joke in a diner in Ohio. Restoring that individual humanity deposited a reserve of emotional endurance. It gave a terrified 19-year-old the exact psychological lifeline he needed to stand back up and face combat the next morning. We know how the German High Command processed this American strategy because British intelligence was listening to them. At a facility called Trent Park, captured German generals were housed in comfort, completely unaware that Mi-19 had hidden microphones in every single room. In thousands of pages of secret transcripts, the German officers obsess over American material abundance. They constantly circle the fact that their enemy had access to portable Coca-Cola bottling plants and endless supplies of chocolate, marveling at the sheer volume of comfort items. Fixating on this logistical superiority provided the captured generals with a convenient alibi. If Germany lost strictly because the Americans had an endless supply of trucks, fuel, and calories, the officers didn't have to face the catastrophic strategic and moral failures of their own regime. They reviewed the evidence of American logistics, but misinterpreted the data. They assumed the United States won through brute material force, missing entirely that America used a portion of those trucks specifically to sustain the psychological will of its fighting men. The traditional German military doctrine treated the soldier as an instrument. His purpose was to execute the mission, and his morale was maintained through strict discipline and political ideology. The American democratic contract operated in reverse. It assumed that the state owed the citizen soldier something in return. Delivering a hot cup of coffee or an independent newspaper to a foxhole was an acknowledgement that a soldier retained his civilian dignity, even in a war zone. Fulfilling that contract cost human lives. Dozens of Red Cross workers were killed by plane crashes and artillery fire. Women like Elizabeth Richardson lie buried in overseas military cemeteries, resting in the exact same soil as the combat troops they volunteered to serve. The German High Command looked for mechanical failures to explain their defeat, but they overlooked the significance of the donut trucks. Those vehicles were industrialized proof that a sprawling democracy was willing to spend fuel, shipping tonnage, and human lives to keep its citizens connected.